So yeah, we'll just wait. I've got an eye on the attendees numbers, so we'll wait for people to join us. Oh, here we are. First couple are in. And hello, everyone. We're just waiting for people to join us. Just open the door. Thank you for arriving, all the early arrivals. I can see you coming. I can't see you, but I can see we have people joining us. So we're just going to give it a see. We're expecting quite a big number today. There's 28 have joined us already, so we'll give it a few more minutes, I think. And as I say, if you're just joining us, we're going to go through a few house rules, and then the floor is yours, so to speak. Thank you to everyone who's sent questions in already. I'll go through how you can ask questions as we go as well, and a few other bits and bobs, a few other house rules. So what's the time? You found the chat box, a few of you. Hi, Gareth. You've found the chat box, so feel free to chat and introduce yourselves. Down at the bottom of the screen, if anyone hasn't got that open, it's there should be 4 or 5 icons at the bottom. I can see we've got 30 attendees now. There's a chat icon, and there's a Q&A icon. We'll just give it another minute or so. Good evening, Lauren. So we've got 31 and a few people using the okay, let's oh, a couple more coming in. Okay, let's go through a few bits and pieces. So welcome to the latest in our series of Meet the DTB sessions. I'm Graham Stacey. I'm not hanging around though. Tonight's going to be hosted by Mark Davis and Tim Hillyer, who hopefully you should see on the screen. Thank you to everyone. Quite a lot of, just a couple of house rules and a bit of information to share. First, you will be able to ask questions as we go. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, hopefully, if you're question, it'll come up in there. If you do want to chat, please use the chat icon rather than function, and you can address everyone. You can address the panelists as you fancy. We will be keeping an eye on the Q&A box, trying to answer as many questions as possible. Or rather, Mark, please, you never know, we might have some junior dons in attendance. Myself and Hannah are here. You can't see Hannah, but she makes all the tech wizardry happen, and she's in the background, and she'll be helping me sort of monitor your questions. And if some are straightforward, or if you've missed the answer, we might be able to point you in the right direction, or we might be able to post a link to a website and so forth in there. So keep an eye. That'll be us. But Mark and Tim will be keeping an eye on there as well, answering your questions. So I think that's it. We've got some good numbers in here. So as long as that's shout up now, if I've missed anything, but I think that's pretty much it. So thank you for joining us. I'll hand over to Mark and Tim. So evening both. Quite a lot to get through tonight. So over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Graham. So I'll go first. I'm Mark Davis. Hopefully some of you will know me. I'm the chair of the Dons Trust board. I chair the stadium committee that has been overseeing the development of the stadium for the past year. And I've been on the board for 7 years now, and I shall be standing down at the AGM this year on the 17th of December. Tim, why don't you say who you are?
Thanks, Mark. This is my second stint on the board, so I served 2 years, was unsuccessful in the election, and stood again and was successful that time around. What I do on the board is provide the link to the national organisations, which I hope everyone's aware of that, visits the website and hopefully have joined up. It's free, so it's well worth keeping an eye on what's happening in the wider world of football. And there's a number of topics that are of great interest to us all, including watching football's not a crime, safe standing, the governance of football as a wider issue, and that's quite topical of late because of the project Big Picture that you're probably aware of. On the board, I'm also involved with the Wimbledon Sporting History, looking after the heritage. And so I declare my interest there when the topic comes up on the board, and I put forward the point of view of wish to my fellow board members. And I've also in recent months been involved with supporting the Plough Lane Bond in admin and chasing up those few who have pledged but not fulfilled. Very grateful to hear from you, and hopefully you're able to make the payment. It's been an absolutely brilliant initiative, and £5.4 million is fundamental to our success in opening the stadium tomorrow.
Tim, I think you didn't say exactly what your roles were on FSA, but I think people would be really interested to know that. Okay,
I was on Supporters Direct, firstly as a representative of the 5 years. So initially, there are at the time each organisation nominated someone to sit on the board of the other organisation, so that we weren't at cross purposes and undermining each other. I then stood back because there was somewhat a lack of diversity on the Supporters Direct board to enable FSF to nominate a female member, which was successful. But they came back to me by the next meeting and co-opted me back onto the board, which was quite an honour. Unfortunately, the direction Supporters Direct were going in was down a cul-de-sac, unfortunately, particularly when it came to funding. So a lot of the funding comes from organisations like the Football Foundation and the FA, and they sort of insisted that the two organisations were duplicating each other, and that criticism had a little bit of validity, but it was disappointing. With representatives nowadays from a number of networks, so the Premier League, Leagues 1, League 2, the Championship. I represent community-owned clubs. There's also women's football now, and there's the diversity groups. So by setting up these networks, it means special interests are looked after. So particularly on non-league, AFC Wimbledon is seen as the exemplar, and everyone else either wants to be us or wishes they could be like us, which is quite difficult to put forward to everyone, because I think each club is unique and they need to find their own way. So we're very happy to cooperate. I know that Eric spent a lot of time and other previous board members. So we've gone to launch meetings of trusts and so forth. So it really is an honour to represent AFC Wimbledon on the national picture.
Cool, thank you. So I think people are going to start putting questions in the question box at some stage, but we've had a few questions sent in advance. Now, the mere fact that they've been sent in advance doesn't mean that I can answer all of them. But there's sort of two sets of questions. One is a group of questions about the I follow service. questions from Chris Stewart that are varied in nature. So we might as well start with the ones that people have taken the trouble to send in advance, and then we'll look at the chat box. So the first question is from Michael Tass, and he said, can you inform me what proportion of the £10 charge for watching AFC away games comes back to the club? It seems that there is no easily available information on this subject. So the honest answer is that I've had some slightly different accounts myself of this, but broadly, let's say that we were going to, I don't know, Swindon, then there is a number for which notionally represents the away crowd we might otherwise collects the money from. And then to the extent that we sell more iFollow places than that, then the extra comes to us. Now, the thing I've heard slightly different accounts of is what that number is, the threshold. I've had one version that it might be different. I've heard one version that's 500, and I've heard another version that it's sort of negotiated case by case. And I don't quite know, but
shall I clarify here, Mark?
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, the difference is according to which division you're in. So in League One, the agreement is that the clubs discuss before the game how many fans would, from previous experience, have been likely to travel. So let's say we're away at Hull, and we say, oh, well, we'd normally take 300. So Hull keep the money from the 300. And I've got the amount per ticket as well, which I'll come back to. Anything over the 300 belongs to the visiting club. But for League Two, the figure is a set 500, which seems somewhat harsh, particularly since there was a couple of big clubs down there like Bolton. So the amount is it is published on the EFL website, but very difficult to find. So the places where I found it most easily today when just double checking was Crewe put out a statement back in September, and Colchester similarly have and the of clubs, because we have such a high degree of interest in our games, and maybe some of our fans have got more spare cash available to pay the tenner. But the amount of money per ticket is £8.10. So for home games, we get for every ticket sold, every match pass, it's £8.10. And there again, for the away games, anything over the agreed figure. And that's not and it's very adept at gauging how many people are likely to travel. We have to tell our police officers, and they relate it to the home team's police officers and the safety advisory group. So it's standard practice that the away contingent is estimated to a large degree. Don't always believe the stewards at the grounds we visit when they seem a bit overwhelmed by the number attending, because from time to time I do check with David Charles, and it always turns out that his figures are far more accurate and seems to reach the ground level at these clubs. So in terms of the funding, I think it's quite clear. Shall we go on to Ed Halls's points, Mark?
That would be great. So Ed Halls has asked 3 questions. Can the DTB ensure that the football club are taking this problem very seriously and are in regular contact with iFollow and pushing them to find quick resolutions to the problems that are reported to them, and issue board meetings so that it doesn't get lost, and so as also to provide a regular update to members within the minutes? Third, if refunds are not forthcoming, perhaps the club can issue free match pass codes as per non-refundable season ticket holders to those that have been affected. So I don't have answers to all of those. We do, we do bring it to the football club's attention. They do take it seriously, but it is quite hard. So I think the first thing to say actually is that people's experiences of iFollow are very mixed. And actually, Tim mentioned the Football Supporters Association networks, and I get a lot of the email traffic for League 1 and 2. And somebody inquired about this on that network last week. And it was really interesting. There were quite a lot of people who say our fans do have some difficulties. And furthermore, there were some comments made about the customer service from iFollow when people do follow up with them. But actually, interestingly, there were some who said, actually, we get very few complaints about the service. I mean, I'd say that was the minority of the responses I saw. But it's not as though it's a universally problematic service. By any stretch of the imagination, but people I know have had some difficulties. People have, and I know have been, and I think Ed is one of them, has been disappointed by the level of responsiveness of iFollow in the past in relation to either getting back, apologising, or refund service. It is frustrating. It, to a certain extent, creates some reputational risk for us because there is a limit to what we can practically do with it. But the FSA actually tweeted about joining forces on this issue to discuss that. And I think maybe if a lot of clubs jointly say, look, there is a problem here, then maybe those problems can be taken more seriously. Yep. So I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Tim.
Yeah, well, certainly on the first question, this is something that even went in the FSF days, so 2-3 years ago, I went along as a league meeting, and engagement. So, going over that, I went along to these meetings, and on at least 2 occasions, things which certainly purpose of the people like Jay Collins communication there, under whom iFollow was run. The excuses don't seem to have changed much. They seem to treat the Football League teams to get more involved. Having said that, I've noticed in particular, I don't know if you saw this, Mark, a big apology to Bolton Wanderers fans. There must have been some big technical problem. And I know we've had a lot of problems with sound this season, which I think has improved. But I myself have had difficulty. Some of it was to do with bandwidth and using Virgin Media. So that's not iFollow's problem. That's low of the half apparently not a browser and is unfortunately who I think are still adult figures, and the technicals that they generate must have gone up 20-fold, 50-fold. We're getting the numbers, but it's early days to start analysing them and compare them to previous seasons. So I'm quite frankly not surprised that they were overwhelmed at the moment. They do seem to be getting better, but that doesn't help those who've had bad experiences and to have asked for a refund, the refund's been agreed and then not been forthcoming. That's just not good enough.
Yeah. So we've got the further questions on iFollow. So I'm just looking for it. One is about, can this be added as a regular item to Don's Trust board meetings? It comes up from time to time. We have a really packed agenda on the Don's Trust board. I'm not going to promise that it's going to be a regular feature on the agenda. We just have so much stuff to deal with. But it does club on it. If refunds aren't forthcoming, perhaps the club can issue free match pass codes. Well, we can pass that suggestion on to the club. We've had a couple more on iFollow on the live chat. I don't want to spend. I mean, we're 20 minutes in. I don't want to spend too long on iFollow, if you don't mind. Can we influence the iFollow commentary, i.e. audio quality and starting late? I'm not sure the audio quality issue, I'm not sure that's always when that's an iFollow issue and when that's our own tech issue. I just don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. It is a bit curious that it doesn't start, sometimes if you click on the away commentary, then they start quite a long time before, and that isn't true of the home commentary. That may be partly a function of the other duties of the people concerned. Is that enough on iFollow? And then there's a question about direct streaming. I just have no idea.
I could come in there, Mark.
Of that.
It will come. I know Facebook were very interested in broadcasting every game to people's phones and tablets and so forth. So the rights situation for football will change dramatically in the next few years, more and more to personal devices rather than to laptops and desktops.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to move on from iFollow, if you don't mind. And the next set of questions we had from Chris Stewart. So actually, Tim, the first one's for you. Are you expecting to want to restand when your time comes up?
I am at the moment totally undecided on that. There's an awful lot to do. The Don's Trust board is having a major transition this time around, quite likely, given the 5 vacancies, and it's a very different scenario from building a stadium with all the planning and legal issues to fitting out and operating the stadium. So those are challenges for the football club, and the oversight responsibilities of the Don's Trust board will also change significantly. It is a massive time commitment, or it has been, particularly falling on some individuals, and I have to single out Mark here, without whom we just wouldn't have got to the finishing line, but there are plenty of others who've been equally dedicated. So I've also been involved with Supporters Direct and FSF and now FSA, and at AFC Wimbledon with Wizza and the DT for long enough, and a lot in my if I've heard whispers of the names of people who are considering standing or have stood, I would be very happy to hand it over when I have the confidence that the good work will continue.
Okay, thanks for that, Tim. And I think I saw somebody sent me a text of a Facebook quote today from somebody on the election steering group giving some of the names. So I think some of those names are out there. So then Chris has asked both of us, do you think it's appropriate for someone who's not passionate about fan ownership of our club to be a director of our trust? So I'll answer that. And I think that's probably a question about, because that was something that came up at a previous open meeting. I don't think it was an SGM that we had online here, the way that Edward answered a question. So my personal take on that, Chris, is that I think we need a diversity of views on the board. I don't, and you know, I think that will protect us in the long term more than everyone towing a particular party line. What I do know about a real shift in terms of effort to make our club the best it can be, and I value that contribution greatly. We have protections. People would need to vote. The restricted action on in supermajority voting, if anything was to happen to be proposed to change fan control. So that's my personal view. Tim, it's asked to both of us, I think.
Yes, like yourself, Mark, I think it's very useful to have a range of opinions around a table, to be challenged, to challenge each other, to have critical friends, and to put those points across to our officers and executives on the football club. I think also that we have to be careful to avoid appointing delegates who all vote the same way, because they've stood on the same points, and that would just get an inertia almost set in stone. I think it's much better to well, for the electorate even to consciously vote a broad so long as people are clear when questioned as to what they stand for and how they intend to project their own opinions, representing the fans, I think that the transparency angle is more important.
And I will go on the questions in the chat box soon, but let's just get through these. Chris's third question is, Don's Trust board meetings are closed to members and minutes usually give little idea of who's saying what, making which arguments, etc. When it comes to election time, how can we as voters decide how well what you do and say in secret matches what you do and say in public? Tim, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I actually stood on this very point in terms of encouraging openness and transparency. And I think having the kiosk on match days, having pro boards, are more of the same. The minutes are more timely and more complete, and many thanks to our secretariat for that. Of necessity, I'm afraid, there's been with construction projects and so forth, and staffing issues, it means an awful lot has to be redacted, which is unfortunate. I would actually go a little bit further than the current way and say that the way people vote, and we have of late had more votes than perhaps in the past. So again, that might be a sign that there are more challenges to each other within the board, and there's probably been more issues that raise those challenges. So yeah, I think in summary is that we should publish votes, because that's the way that people have ultimately decided. And we should encourage more correspondence and more challenges from our members.
Thanks, Tim. And maybe what I'll just do is I'll read out the rest of Chris's questions, and then we'll because as you alluded to, they kind of overlap. So the other questions Chris has asked, wouldn't it be much better if Don's Trust board minutes were fuller and gave more detail of what Don's Trust board members do and say in meetings? What do you think of the idea of having open parts of Don's Trust board meetings where members can see what goes on and how? Would you be interested in finding out from other organisations that do things like this, how they do it and how it works? what do you think are the main reasons why Don's Trust Board minutes are so often not published in good time, as instructed by members? And to Tim, what are your plans to fix this? So I'll just give a few remarks on that. I mean, first of all, maybe I would say this, wouldn't I? But I have no particular saying one thing in the privacy of a meeting and then saying completely different things in Don's Trust Board meetings. I don't have any in public. I don't have any examples of that script of the meeting. Then that one has said, you know, there are things that are just confidential that can't be fully recorded, and personally, I don't believe in fuller than they used to be back in the day. It takes the longer they are, the longer they take to edit. And it does become a very time-consuming process, and there is a balancing act there between making them etc. and spending ages to edit them, but on the other hand, being transparent to members. I suppose the other thing, frankly, is the way the world works. If a board member were acting in the way that Chris is suggesting, in one way or another, it would probably come to light whether it should or shouldn't. So I've talked a bit about my perspective on fuller meeting minutes. I think they are fuller than they used to be. The idea of open parts of Don's Trust Board meetings, yeah, maybe. I mean, the only thing I'd say is that, you know, we're not councillors, we're not politicians, and you know, some people would find that more inhibiting possibly than others. So it might just affect, you know, it wouldn't necessarily have the desired effect on me. It probably isn't going to happen between now and December the 17th, and therefore it's less an issue for me. In terms of minutes being not published in good time, I mean, they get approved at the board meeting following which a draft appears, and then they are finalised and published. Performance on that has gone backwards and forwards a bit. There have been some health issues, for instance, among some of the Secretariat recently. That has been a factor. There was a period of time, I think it happens to quite that extent recently, but there have been a few extenuating circumstances recently. So sorry, Tim, I've just galloped through all of Chris's. Maybe there are points there you want to mention or not.
Well, I think, Mark, you've covered most of what I was going to say. On the point about the fuller minutes, I think what's more important is to get the essence of the arguments across. So just to say there was a discussion about such and such, and there were views, and to describe those views. But we just cannot produce something like Hansard. And even when you have to refer to Hansard, you often get sections of it which just say inaudible. So in other words, the transcribing team just couldn't pick up who said what at any particular time. And that's despite the chamber of the Houses of Parliament being fully fitted out with microphones everywhere. So I actually think the Secretariat do an amazing job. They're all volunteers. To replace them with paid staff would cost hundreds of pounds. Supporters Direct went down that road for a year or two. And the minutes that were produced were no more timely, were no better in content. No, the people who produced them were great. There were two different organisations, but for the expense compared with either a staff member or a volunteer doing it, it didn't actually benefit. In terms of having open parts of meetings, I think that it would be useful, particularly for prospective members of the board, those standing for election or considering standing, to apply to come and observe. I think we can trust people to be either to leave the room when requested, or to stay silent on something if something controversial or that shouldn't be broadcast happen to be mentioned. That's been the case in the past, and I would welcome that back again. And Chris, you've asked about finding out from other organisations. Yes, absolutely. You have, or give us a direction of travel where we can investigate how to do better. And you've said about in good time. I think we could get, when we currently send out, just with the agenda, so that people, but setting out the agenda and maybe a very quick summary. But even then, it's a couple of weeks, and we're turning the minutes around in 4 to 5 weeks.
Thanks, Tim. So I think we're now on to the questions in the question box. So I guess we just go through them in order. And the first one is from Tim Probert, assuming lockdown 2 does end on the 2nd of December, what scope is there for fans to visit the new stadium, either through tours or perhaps meals, the bar, etc.? What is being explored to this end? So I think Joe did say on the SGM recently that we'd see what we could do on stadium visits. And I think Wish themselves actually have some aspirations as if that proceeds to be involved in that. And also we will look into the bar. I mean, the bar is going through a licensing process at the moment yet, but that is going through the process. So it's being looked into. I don't have concrete plan. No concrete plans for that have been brought forward yet.
I think the club shop is an important part of this, because that's a destination. I've been lucky enough to see the plans, which look very exciting. The museum, and it will be the new year, but it's amazing how quickly things like retail can turn around, and fitting out bars as well. We've seen just in the last 2-3 weeks the amazing progress in fitting out the stadium, and that will continue behind the scenes.
Great. So the next one is from Mike Berry. Can you give a flavour of the non-essential match day attendees tomorrow night? Will Chris Eric be there? And then it says, Graham, did you want to come in on that, or are you just, there's something that says Graham Stacey would like to answer this question live, or shall I answer it? I think the situation is that the people who'll be there tomorrow and it is really bittersweet that tomorrow should be a triumphant day. First match back in Merton for the home team, first team for 29.5 years, and virtually no one can go, and that's quite a strange situation. The clearly operational people can be there, but the situation is that 20 quote-unquote directors of the club the two clubs combined, i.e. us and Doncaster. And as it happens, Doncaster aren't bringing anyone tomorrow. So the issue of who could attend has taken many, many hours and quite a difficult topic. And we spent quite a lot of time on it, actually, at the long last Don's Trust board meeting. There were people there who are in the nature of directors of the club, and so that some of those names. So we did a ballot. Some names of some of the longest serving volunteers went into the hat, and some of the people, such as Mike has just suggested, in terms of people who were instrumental in just setting up the club and making the project happen, and indeed civic leaders. So we went. There was a ballot. I mean, I'm not going to out the people who are going to be there, aren't going to be there, but I think there are some really deserving names on that list, and maybe we'll be able to do a bit of publicity about that after the event. It was a pretty invidious task, and sort of spent some semi-sleepless nights on thinking that one through, but hopefully there are some people there who have every right to be there and can be very proud of being there and of their contribution in what we've achieved over the years and in making the stadium happen. So I think that's probably enough to say on that, if that's okay. I'm going to move on, unless you've got anything, which is Adam Russell has said, we've had a couple of contracts recently which weren't tendered in recent Don's Trust board minutes, the Secutix ticketing system and Matchday digital program platform. What assurances do the Don's Trust board have in place to assure us that contracts are good value for money for the club and that the procurement route chosen, e.g. tender or not, are appropriate? So I think, and this came up on pro boards, and I do need to remind myself of the answer, but I think there is a general procedure that the clubs see. That doesn't happen 100% of the time, and for instance, I think with ticketing systems, there ain't a whole load of people who do them, is my understanding. It's not a vast field, and people bring prior experience of how we went about procuring Secutix. But I do know that we have had another platform in the past, and the decision was made to go with another one, and there isn't a huge amount of choice out there. And then on Matchday Digital, I mean, I think there was, again, I don't think there's a vast amount of choice, and I don't know the ins and outs of how it came about precisely. I think you'll have seen in the minutes that and there's been some questions on pro boards about conflicts of interest, that a couple of people associated with the club are involved in that. But I think that was, sometimes, and this can happen in a number of organisations, when opportunities are brought proactively, as opposed to the club being on the market, in the market for something, then sometimes different procurement approaches happen. So, Tim, you got anything to add to that? Or?
Yes, I've got nothing on those specific points further to what you've said there. I do know that in some areas, for instance, that the IT, putting in the Cat5 wiring and all that, the IT and comms, that a vast amount of effort has gone into hardware and software, taking up quotes, driving configuration of the stadium changed. We were, for instance, able to adjust the number of big screens that we had on the concourses. Those sort of things can vary the outgoings considerably. And there has been a lot of work as well in liaising with other clubs. So other clubs go through the same process. There's no point in repeating their experience. So shortcuts have to be taken sometimes, and you start with other people's best experience and build on that, rather than going through an entire process when you know what the answer is going to be.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is from an anonymous attendee. Everyone in football has been affected by the coronavirus pandemic, but how have Wimbledon been affected compared to other clubs in our league and in the wider football pyramid? What lessons have we learned? Tim, you can go first. I can go first. Don't mind.
Yeah, there's two aspects here. One is short-term money to pay the wages at the end of the month. Then there's medium-term, getting to the end of the season, and then I think this touches into the wider implications of football governance. And we've all heard about Project Big Picture, started off by two of the biggest clubs in the world, let alone in England, very much from a self-interest perspective. The rest of the Premier League saw through it very quickly. So that, once announced in the Telegraph, I think it was the Sunday Telegraph, it only lasted a couple of days before the whole thing got withdrawn. But the self-interest from the Football League was there, very plain to see, in that there's a desperation from some clubs to get to the end of the month. And there hasn't been a full answer in that. The Premier League simply loaned enough money for a couple of months to Football League clubs. That will run out around about Christmas time. And unlike us, where we've budgeted, unfortunately, but as it turned out very prudently, we have budgeted for 0 attendance all season. So it will be a bonus if we manage to get crowds in hopefully February, March sort of period. We have to see how the virus goes. But I'm afraid there are other clubs that are going to be in terrible trouble unless the Premier League or the trickle down, having garnered too great a slice of the cake for themselves. They really need to realise that the strength of English football is in the pyramid. And talking about wider aspects of governance, the FSA are widely seen to have produced the best template, to the extent that the government are pushing this, and it's described as the fan-led proposals. You can view them on the FSAU website. They've been many years in the making, and I was involved in that as long ago as 5-6 years ago in drafting up the proposals, ensuring that they would not be just thrown out because we were asking for too much. They're realistic, they're succinct, there is a plan there. And have at least reacted positively. It will be a question of getting through the big votes, because to get anything through the Premier League, you've got to get 14 out of the 20 clubs to vote in favour, and that is a very difficult threshold. So I'm afraid there's going to be real pain around about New Year.
Thanks, Tim. So just to give my own answer to the question, I mean, I think on the whole, we are in a slightly more fortunate position than many clubs, and the new stadium actually has a lot to do with that. So partly because actually we're a club that's used to cutting our own cloth anyway, and have always had to manage things to match our means. So in some respects our cost base is more manageable than many other clubs will be anyway. But actually, more importantly, two respects. First is the new stadium has meant we've been able to launch a debenture scheme, which is really a one-off thing, and also to secure their seats in the stadium, fans have been willing to put their hand on refinancing to, which it risk the season. And I think I trust fans have done that knowingly, knowing that what they're doing in a fan-owned club is recognizing that our money comes from the fans, and that without the fans putting their hands in their pockets, we'd be in a difficult position. So I think our fan ownership plus a new stadium has given us a pretty unique situation. Oh gosh, that sounds like some bad words to use in the context of this football club in the history, but it gives us a unique angle on which we have been able to remain afloat. If this situation goes into next season, it becomes much more challenging. We can't do what a second round of debentures, what takes its place. So that's my answer. The next question: when will the stadium be properly ready for fans with no more construction or finishing work to do? It still resembles a building site from the outside. That's from Peter Leng. So I'll take that. So yes, well spotted, Peter. I mean, tomorrow the cameras will show a pitch that is complete. It'll show some, the west stand, on the outside, all is complete. The semi-permanent stands are basically complete, albeit without. I don't know if 100% of the seats have been done yet, and certainly the rail seating won't have been done yet. But we are the vast amount of the way through the construction. But there are some items to be completed between now and early December. So as of early December, then the West Stand will be completed inside as well as outside, not just the changing rooms, but everything, and up to the second floor. The third floor, kitting out the third floor, was always a project for later. And the semi-permanent stands will be done. The area out at the front, which does look a bit like which is a building site, will have been completed. There'll be a hard standing round the outside, etc. So that's all due to have been completed by early December. There are two things that will drag on for a little while yet. One is the perimeter fence around the east side behind the east stand, which will be done over the coming months. And then actually the plan to have a five-a-side football pitch, which isn't an integral part, but is something we want to do. So those will follow later, but basically it'll be done by early December. So I hope that one's done. And Tim was, well, maybe actually we can follow on to, and Tim might want to answer part of, when will the bar, museum and club shop be open in Plough Lane Stadium, from Andy Ramsden. So to be decided, I think, is the honest answer. I would hope that the club shop should be pretty soon after early December. It needs to be fitted out, etc. And in the meantime, of course, we've got the shop in Centre Court. The museum will take some time, I'm sure, to fit out. And the bar, as I say, whilst the works will have been done by December, there are some commercial arrangements behind the scenes going on, and also the licensing process. So I can't give you a precise date on that, but as soon as possible.
I think now's a good opportunity to pay tribute to the incredible work done by not only Matt Haylock as the manager of the shop, with the help of George Jones, who seems ever present, but the volunteers as well, Mark Lewis and Esther and Anna, and the list goes on and on. It's absolutely brilliant. And when during the lockdown, the online sales were amazing. Unfortunately for the next month, and we're leading into the Christmas period, which is obviously prime present buying spell, there's lots of new product just appearing on the website. Matt is opening up. I don't know if people are aware, but what was the hospitality sales area has now moved out, and Matt is taking over that area to extend the shop display area. So I think the shop will remain in Centre Court till at least Christmas, and we'll have to see how quickly we can get everything opened up, because we're desperate to get everyone to come and visit, not only the shop but the museum and the bar likewise. It's going to be very difficult to operate the bar while there's still construction work on the residential part of the development going on all around, but it's certainly looking forward to that. And I think we're back onto another question from Andy Ramsden.
Yeah, so Andy's asked, oh no, yeah, do we know which bar supply has been successful? So I'm afraid I'm going to dodge that one, Andy, because I know, but I don't want to scoop the club on that. And sometimes maybe that is a question that needs to be answered, but I'm not going to answer it without knowing whether that is still commercially confidential or not. But so I'm afraid I'm just going to skip that question. Matthew Cooper has asked, should board members undertake the work of the club or have more of a scrutinising role? So Tim, why don't you give your answer? I'll then have a go.
Well, my answer is never to refuse help and volunteering from anyone, but there is a balance to be struck here, and some board members maybe have more time or a better time management and are able to commit more fully hands-on. Others do it more from an organisational point of view and bring in volunteers they can trust to deliver. It's each within their own interest area and abilities and time. I think that the scrutinising role is fundamental. So I would describe it as oversight, and that is that you don't scrutinise everything. We're not there to micromanage the officers of the club, but we are there to ask the awkward questions. And personally, I see my role as picking out those awkward and to me interesting points to make sure that we dig deep and learn from that, so that the club is better as a result.
So I agree with that, and I think in the past I've even stood on that in my manifesto about not micromanaging. We do have a professional staff within the club, and our job is in general to oversee rather than to do it. There are exceptions. There are times when we bring, particular individuals will bring particular value and expertise on particular things. I mean, to the extent, I don't know, so arguably the stadium has been a bit different, just because it's been an existential issue for the club, and B, because actually there's no reason why the professionals in the club should have expertise in delivering football stadia. It's something that football clubs do, once every other generation or once every 100 years or whatever it is. And so there were other people. So we felt that was an area that we needed more extensive involvement, and hence the stadium committee. And also where, whilst I'm not a construction person, for instance, I've been in and around capital projects for much of my life. So we probably have been more hands-on on that than other things. Now, I think we've answered that, Matthew, I hope. The next one is from Chris Stevens. Have we got a total figure that had previously been pledged towards the Plough Lane bond but not completed payment? So first of all, the figure in my mind that you will see on the totalizer or whatever is £5,426,000, £581. I check it about 5 times a day. There was a figure, and that figure is basically those bonds that have been pledged. It doesn't relate to whether they've been paid or not, but occasionally, as I understand it, and Tim's involved in this process, we knock amounts off when they know they're not going to be paid. And about a month ago, we advertised that having chased people as many times as it was reasonable to chase, if they hadn't paid by the end of October, we would cancel those that hadn't been paid. So the amount at the time, I'm trying to remember, I think it was something like £90,000 or something, or may have been a bit less. And some of those amounts have been paid in the meantime, but some haven't. But the amount, you know, it's about 5.35-ish or something that is actually cash in the bank from it. I don't have that precise figure, but we are due to make a further payment to the club from the trust as by way of a sort of mopping up payment in the next week or two. Tim's been closely involved, actually. Tim, anything, have I got that right?
Yes, and it's perfect time to pay tribute to our new Don's Trust treasurer, Michelle, who has done a superb job in picking up the pace and absorbing all the different nuances of historical things of the previous bond, so that we're right on top of everything that. Let's not forget that these bonds are debts that we have to pay back. So we're not only going to pay interest, then we have to make sure we've got cash in the bank to pay the interest at the right time. We've got to have a system to make those payments. And we have to be ready at the end of the 5-year, 10-year, 20-year periods to pay it back. So Michelle's got her head around that quickly. I was very hands-on and with the help of Anna Macmillan, made a number of, sent loads of emails initially, which, because the process wasn't entirely clear to start with. So some people had thought they'd paid, but at the time they hadn't. So there was a little bit of support work going in there to say, I'm very sorry to disturb you, but you need to complete the payment. And the vast majority did that in a timely manner. There were a few, because let's not forget that we were running into the start of the pandemic, where people were put on furlough, lost their jobs, situation had changed, and others had inadvertently made duplicate applications. So part of it was a tidying up process. I hope we were empathetic and listened to people. I'm really grateful for people who sort of resolved their own personal financial issues and ultimately paid up. It's still open, so please, if you can afford it, please add your money. It is a very good rate of interest compared to what's out there on the high street, and you know it's in safe hands.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So now it's sort of gone half past, so I suggest we've got a few more questions, but we won't, you know, let's try and do it in sort of 20-ish minutes or something like that. So we'll up the pace a bit. And somebody anonymous has asked, what is the current progress on setting the new strategy, long-term plan for the club? We did everything we wanted to do in 18 years, so need some direction for the next 20. You're right, we need a new strategy. Our current strategy was set in around 2010 through a strategy making process that some of you will remember. It basically said we wanted to go back to Merton, we wanted to remain fan owned, and we're ambitious actually to go as high up the pyramid as was possible. And, you know, tomorrow we'll play our first game back in Merton as a league club and still fan owned. So kind of job done. We need a new strategy. There was a bit of a start made on one last year, but it didn't really go very far, that process. And I think it's fair to say that whilst you know, we don't have a new strategy yet, so much has just gone in to delivering our current strategy that it really has distracted attention from creating a new strategy. So we need to move into that. There are some people who've been identified to help with that process, who've been involved in our previous strategy work. Realistically, I don't think a huge amount is going to get done between now and year end. So I think it's really a matter for the new board working with Joe Palmer, the chief executive, because actually, the strategy needs to be business driven as well as vision driven. And Joe is very keen to have a long-term strategy. So, we need a new strategy. Given the timescales, I think my involvement is in helping to complete the final bits of the existing one, and I look to the board beyond 17th of December to develop a new one. Tim, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, that's very much one for the new board. So we have to do a tidy up in readiness for the AGM, and then the new board can focus on fitting out the stadium, deciding the objectives, a fresh 10-year plan, effectively.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on. So another.
I think you have to go back. Are you going to the Nesta Guinness Walker question?
Yeah. So an anonymous attendee has said, "Good evening. My question is around how much involvement we have with regards to marketing the new stadium and the brand of the club. I was a bit disappointed that the club hired in a female model alongside Nesta Guinness Walker to model the kit rather than use one of our ladies' team players. Can we get assurance that all teams are considered to be part of the club with equal importance?"
Can I answer that, Mark?
Go for it.
I was absolutely appalled. I think it was so disrespectful, and it was a major faux pas, and we must not let anything like that happen again.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I know the pictures. I hadn't clocked who was who and who wasn't who, if I'm completely honest. But that is one of those areas where, is that a brand issue or is that a choice of model issue? Is that a marketing issue? That is the kind of issue that you leave to the club to get on with, or is that an issue where the owners get involved? It's one of those areas where there are constantly questions about whether that's a question for the trust board or the professional management. So I'm going to move us on again. Adam Russell has asked, do you feel football needs an independent regulator rather than the current model? Tim, why don't you do that?
Yeah. Adam, I have to refer you to the FSA again here. Our recommendation is that the Football Association do the job that they're there to do. Yes, they will need a department that has the financial acumen and expertise to look at the numbers and report. But they need to have teeth. They need to have the respect of the Premier League, the Football League, and the rest of the pyramid. And we keep referring to the German model. The German model works because each of the bodies and the clubs within them respect each other and follow their own rules. Instead of, in this country, we just seem to wish to undermine it. We've had the Premier League breakaway. Now we've had a move for a breakaway from the Premier League. We need to strengthen up the Football Association.
Okay. I'm going to move us on again, if you don't mind. So Tim Probert has asked, I see the small section of rail seating installed is black. Will the entire section be black? So Tim Probert, I have to admit, you're ahead of me here. There's two possibilities. One is you're right, that it's black. The other is that when you peer at the photos, it's just that the rail seating hasn't gone in yet and it won't be black. I genuinely don't know the answer to that. What I can imagine is that the choices are less than they are for seats. So I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that. You know, I think it's great that we were able to get some rail seating, by the way. But the aesthetic of a bowl with with blue and yellow seating all around the bowl did look quite good, and it will, to some extent, disrupt that aesthetic. But a great sacrifice to make, as far as I'm concerned.
On match days, Mark, it'll be full of fans, so you
Well,
won't
that's true.
notice the colour of the seats.
That's true. Then Laurent Gibault has asked, pub name, are we the DT members going to get to choose the name of the pub? So my understanding is that there is going to be a sort of, what's the word, a survey, quiz, survey on preferences as between the Sportsman and the Batsford Arms. I don't know whether that will be Don's Trust members or fans, and I think that's to be decided. And I think that is kind of an interesting point, where actually it's the people who use the stadium who you kind of think should be the people to choose that. One would have thought, rather than necessarily the Don's Trust members. I have to say, incidentally, two things. One is that actually, whenever we have surveys, it's pretty rare that there's a big split in our surveys between what Trust members say and, you know, other fans who aren't Trust members say. They're usually pretty closely aligned anyway. The second thing is, I just want to pay a bit of a tribute to Luke, actually, in the sense that, you know, a couple of years ago we were coming under some criticism for the lack of consultation that was going on aspects of the stadium. There was good reason for that, which was that it was, in a sense, there were many things it was premature to consult upon, and actually, had we consulted upon, wouldn't have been able to honour anyway, just because of the way things evolved. But actually, Luke has been a member of the stadium committee and has taken particular responsibility for leading and driving forward some of the consultations that you've all seen over the past year or so. So I don't think the precise process for the pub naming one has been decided yet. It's in the works. Tim, is there anything you wanted to add on that?
No, other than to add my thanks to Luke for organising the surveys, which have been most instructive to help the board make decisions based on real feedback.
Okay. So we've got two questions on naming rights, one from Matthew Cooper and one from Adam Proctor, which is basically an update on possible stadium naming rights. So there have been negotiations with various parties, and those continue. And when we've got something to say, we will say it. In the meantime, we refer to the stadium as Plough Lane, and as and when we have a stadium naming rights partner who comes up with an amount of money that makes it worth our while to give it a different name, then it will have a different name. And then a question from Adam Russell on the stadium design. So initially Eric said we couldn't have edge lighting on the stadium roof as the roof was too low. It looked like we now have edge lighting. Is the roof now higher than initially? And B, will we still get the toothbrush style leaning floodlights in the final 20,000 configuration? I liked it, but I can imagine designs change. So my understanding, Adam, is that yes, originally there were these sort of four leaning toothbrush style floodlights around the stadium. What we have now is we do have along the west stand these sort of edge lights along the edge of the roof. I don't know if that means the roof's got higher. I'm not aware that it has actually. that proved to be possible for whatever reason. But we still have 2 floodlight towers in the southeast and northeast corners. Those don't lean in toothbrush style, they're vertical, I believe. And my understanding is that the toothbrush style ones actually would have been pretty expensive to deliver, would have constrained internal space, and there's also a bit of a maintainability issue because they actually go through the structure. They would actually go through the structure of the stand, and that adds quite a lot of complexity to design, quite a lot of cost, and uses up some space. So I think I'm right in saying, for instance, that the conferencing area, the banqueting and whatever it's called, actually some floor space that would have been taken up by that going through it isn't taken up by going through it. So that's the answer to that. And Tim, did you have any views on that particular issue? Or
Oh, you're far more knowledgeable on that than I.
Okay, and then Peter Leng has asked, any progress on getting our SW17 part of Plough Lane redesignated as SW19? So we haven't given up on that, and actually Wish colleagues have helped us in putting together a bit of a case on that, and we continue to lobby for it. It ain't going to be done by tomorrow, that's for sure. And actually it took a tiny bit of time to even just to finalize what our postcode is, just our SW17 postcode, because it's not actually the same postcode as the Greyhound Stadium. It is SW170NR, and we even had to have the stadium designation revised with the updated postcode. So that's an ongoing project. I don't know whether it will happen. I don't know when it will happen, but work has gone on behind the scenes on it. And then Tim has asked, Probert, final question from me. Do we have sufficient funding available to finish phase 1 to spec, or might there be any nasty surprises lurking? As currently stands, the phase 1 of the project is fully funded, taking account of the fact, and I think there's been a bit of this on Pro Boards, that we'll need to raise about £500,000 of equity as part of the final plan for that, but actually that's pretty much spoken for. So we are fully funded. Will there be any nasty surprises? Hopefully not. One of the things I have to say is that from meeting to meeting, costs always come up that you hadn't quite anticipated. It's a bit like that old Not the 9 o'clock news sketch. Do you want woofers with it or tweeters with it, or the speakers, and there's always an element of that, and these things, constantly come along, but actually they're not big things, and we're pretty much done and dusted. The only element that is of substantial ongoing work is 2 areas, as I said. One is the eastern perimeter that will happen over the next few months. There is a bit of variation around the cost on that, depending on the precise figuration. Hopefully that won't be a nasty surprise. And then I think we do have quotes for the 5-a-side pitch, but those are that's being funded by other parties anyway. So fingers crossed, we're there on the finance, but no doubt at the next finance committee meeting, somebody will say you need woofers or tweeters with it, and we'll be sort of poking around with various bits of contingency that we still have in there in one shape or form, but we're pretty much done and dusted. I actually don't lose much. This time last year, we were, was I quoting a Guy Ritchie film? I'm very interested in that. Somebody can tell me what it was. I wasn't knowingly quoting a film. This time last year, clearly we were not fully funded. That was keeping me awake at night. I'm not being kept awake at night by the funding plan for phase 1 of the stadium.
So, was it done and dusted? Was that the quote?
I don't know. Is that a film?
No, it's I think it was a quote from the film.
Okay,
Come back to us.
could be. Just finish with the bag on your head bit, Mark. Okay, cool. So I think that's all the questions. As with most meetings that I chair, we've overrun by 20 minutes, but I hope that's okay. And if it wasn't okay, you're allowed to vote with your feet. So talking about speakers, is it Bose installing the stadium PA? I can't remember, Andy, and I just can't remember who's doing the PA system. Sorry. So I think we're sort of done. Is there any final knockings from you, Tim?
Yeah, just to reassure everyone with regard to the coverage tomorrow, because it's been, as you would expect, a lot of last minute work. The electricity only went in a couple of weeks ago, and the BT lines for the broadband and everything just about a week ago. I follow to ensure that there are no technical glitches. We've actually sent a satellite truck, which I know is parked securely around the back of the stadium. So fingers crossed that we can all enjoy the coverage via iFollow tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, thank you, everyone. That was, I hope you got something out of that. And thank you, I should say, to Graham and Hannah for organising these. Great innovation. And we look forward to a magnificent evening tomorrow, wherever we're following it from. A big event in our club's history. So enjoy tomorrow, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.